From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Always appreciate Jon Stinchcomb here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And so, Jon, for better or worse, I see this as quarterback who's struggling while also doing some good things. Yet the struggles, the interceptions seem more noticeable, or notable is what I'm looking for, seem more notable to me than some of the good things that he's doing. And some of the defense of Beck by Kirby Smart seems a little hard for some Georgia fans to believe, given the way that Kirby typically talks about high standard for players at all positions. What do you make of that idea first?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And I'm right there with the fans and looking at it going, the turnovers are egregious. And this stretch of 11 interceptions and a bad fumble is noteworthy. And we've been trained by Coach Smart to hear the message of you're either elite or you're not. And the standard is what the standard is. And the expectations are high. And the bar is going to be set high. And that's why it's such a departure to hear at times what comes across as a defense of a player who's not living up to that standard. Now, I do agree with Coach Smart. He's not alone. Carson Beck is not the only issue with this offense. You look at their turnovers and you see a number of routes that probably weren't run correctly and some balls where our receivers didn't battle for them. But it's such a strange thing to hear from Coach Smart in that, here's what he's redirecting focus and look at all the good things that Carson's doing. And he's not wrong there. He's not wrong that other players have made mistakes and they need to step up. He's not wrong in saying that Carson is capable of making some uniquely talented plays that other players cannot make and has done so at times. But it's just such a departure to hear this kind of redirection when turnovers is always a huge issue. And it's apparent that during this stretch, a lot of them are coming from one particular player. So I don't think the fans are wrong. And I think it's more of a departure from what we've been trained to expect from this Georgia team and this Georgia coaching staff that is kind of eye-opening.
So here's the assumption that I'm making, and you're more level-headed than me, so I'm always appreciative of your, response to stuff like this. My assumption is that Kirby Smart deep down doesn't necessarily believe everything that he's saying, but like a lot of coaches, wants to protect his quarterback in terms of his public comments, and anything that he might say that had the potential to diminish Beck in the eyes of his teammates would only make things harder for Georgia the rest of the way. This just sort of feels like football coaching 101. Perhaps coaches are too careful with how they speak about quarterbacks, that maybe the situation isn't as fragile as coaches treat it to be. But in this particular case, Kirby's far from the first coach to be forced to sort of handle things this way. How much of that is just the truth here is that Kirby is being extra careful with Beck because that's what coaches do when it comes to their quarterbacks?
Yeah, I don't know if it's care. I don't know if it's protecting Carson. I do know that coaches are very aware as to what message that's going out is also going in. It's going into that locker room. The players are aware more of what the coaches say than what the media is saying, and they're aware of that. I mean, how many players are on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, not
Sure.
the drug, and aware of what's being said. So it's anytime there's coaches that are going to speak, whether it's after a game or during the week, players are going to be aware of it, and they're going to hear the message that is coming from in-house, if you will, more so and louder than what's being said about them from the outside looking in. So I do think Coach Smart is very aware of not only what Carson is hearing from the outside or what's being projected, but also the rest of the team. And let's commend the fact that despite this, I think, almost historic run for Georgia, at least in this Kirby Smart era of turnovers, they're still able to win games and overcome some serious adversity. Now, they had to rally against Alabama and came up short, but what Coach Smart has done is pretty historic just in general. But he is very aware of the message that's being heard in his locker room, and we are not privy to what's being said behind closed doors. I don't know what Coach Bobo and those conversations are with the quarterbacks and that offensive group is from day to day, nor to the entire team. So there is no doubt that he is very cognizant of the fact that what's being projected, how he responds to these games and these turnovers is being heard within that locker room.
So the one thing that I think that I get asked a lot in our comment sections, but also just from people in life, that doesn't come up in like official channels at all is, why not give Gunnar Stockton a chance? If Carson's struggling that way, why not give Gunnar his shot? And my response to that is always this, and you can tell me your thoughts on this too, that if Gunnar was a player capable right now, and I say this as someone who's a very big Gunnar Stockton fan, I think that Gunnar in 2025 could be a really good starting quarterback for Georgia. I have a lot of stock, so to speak, purchased on Gunnar Stockton. I like him as a quarterback. But even as a pro-Gunnar guy, that if Stockton was right now someone who could play at a similar level to Carson Beck, we would be hearing that. We would have been hearing that. Good news almost always leaks out of the Georgia program, and when there's silence on any given topic, that is perhaps meaningful too. And I would say in terms of the other quarterbacks around Georgia right now, there was some positive chatter about Gunnar when it came out of, fall camp, things like that. But in terms of being, boy, this guy, he may even be better than Carson Beck, there was silence on that topic, which to me is somewhat meaningful. So the reason why Georgia does, even if Beck perhaps had thrown a fourth pick on Saturday, the reason why Georgia, I don't think, is having any discussion, certainly publicly, about trying something different, seeing if a different guy could get a spark, is because of the absence of chatter about the other quarterbacks at Georgia right now. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think it's the same line of thinking as when Stetson was quarterback. And folks were like, oh, there were times where they're begging to see Carson because they didn't like that's part of the fans' nature, is when things don't go well, maybe there's another guy who can do better. And I'm sure Gunnar is developing. I'm sure he's going to be great when his time comes. But I think that's also part of the message that Coach Smart is projecting is right now Carson is our guy, and we are going to rally behind him. When the time comes, we'll turn the page and tell you how great Gunnar Stockton is, and we'll be able to show you that. But right now, what gives Georgia the very best opportunity to win and be successful? The coaching staff, who works with this team on a daily basis, I will add, and remind fans, those that we don't get to be in those meetings. We don't get to see practice. We don't get to see the development of all the quarterbacks and where they're at. They feel confident. Carson Beck, despite the fact that these turnovers keep occurring, provides the best opportunity for this offense. I know this. There were times where folks were begging to see Brock Vandegrift, and I understand that the talent that surrounds him in Kentucky is different than what we have in Georgia, but it certainly hasn't been a flawless season for him in Kentucky. And so I think there is this cautionary tale for fans that they think that, we just need the next guy up. And that is not always the case. And I'm sure when the time comes, Gunnar will be ready and prepared as this coaching staff can possibly get him for when that opportunity presents itself. But right now, even based on what's coming from Coach Smart and really the entire team, they feel confident that Carson still provides that best opportunity for Georgia to win every Saturday.
How about the other topic that comes up here about the role that the offensive coordinator Mike Bobo plays in all of this? And I'm willing to have that discussion, although I would say that my viewpoint's probably different than some fans. The best that I could tell, I thought Coach Bobo had a pretty good day on Saturday. There were open receivers at times that weren't hit. I think that's probably an example of a well-designed play. If a receiver's open, but he's not connected on, that seems like a positive check for the offensive coordinator. Sometimes it just didn't quite happen. But also when it was obvious that Georgia A has no running game, and eventually we got to get into that conversation at some point in time, no running game, lack of confidence about the ability to throw it deep downfield, given the sort of small category of plays that seemed like they had a chance to work for Georgia. Well, that's what Bobo kind of went to and allowed Georgia to score a couple of touchdowns that gave them the margin to win this game. I don't want to, oversimplify this, but to the best that I could tell, it looked to me like Mike Bobo did a pretty good job on Saturday of working with what he had to work with.
Yeah, I'm looking at play design and play choice. And right now, I think that's not the concern. My concern is not that, man, we're getting bypassed by great coordinators out there that are drawing up these fantastic schemes. I see it each week. When I go back and watch the film and you go, man, that's a great design. There are plays open in pass in the passing game and in run. I think back 2 weeks ago, or at least before the bye, when Dylan Bell was on the jet trail sweep, and I'm like, that's a great play design. Or there are plays where we've gotten dealt open and missed him, and you think, man, that's a missed opportunity. So I don't think that's the issue. I think you've hit on what the bigger issues are. It's our receivers that have dropped some opportunities. Carson's missed some opportunities, and I think the underlying issue is the run game. The fact that I don't know whether it's a feather in the cap of Cash Jones. I think that's commendable. The fact that he has played himself into a reliable role for this offense. That's great for Cash Jones. My concern comes with, what about the scholarship backs that we've been recruiting for these past couple years that can't seem to be additive to this offense? I also think the offensive line has underperformed from what the expectations were to begin this year. And that gets overlooked. And you combine all these various assets or aspects of this offense, and that's why you get a team that just doesn't seem to be able to realize what the potential could have been when we entered this season. And Carson is a part of that. He is arguably one of the biggest aspects of that, but a lackluster run game, a receiving core that hasn't been able to produce consistently, that has run the wrong routes at times and dropped passes at times, an offensive line that hasn't opened up holes in the run game. And because whether it's a rotation of players or just getting beat one-on-one has provided a little more pressure on Carson that has led to either turnovers or throwaways or missed opportunities. That's a comprehensive look. And I don't think that falls at the feet of Coach Bobo when you say he can, he's not doing a great job as a coordinator. I don't think that's where the liability lies.
I've got one more topic I want to hit with you, but let me, if you don't mind, a quick follow-up on that. To me, what's the most jarring about Georgia and its running game right now is not the fact that the running game is ineffective. It's the fact that seemingly Georgia is going into games knowing that the running game is likely to be ineffective. Some of the things that Kirby Smart has said is sort of an acknowledgement of the fact that they don't believe they can run it right now. It's a very different persona for it as a team than what Georgia would have had in the early days of Kirby Smart, and some of that was a necessary change. Georgia probably needed to throw it better than it did in the early days of Kirby Smart, but my gosh, to now be to the point where they are seemingly content to be one of the least runningist, to use bad grammar, but they call fewer rushing plays than almost any team in America. Certainly, SEC team-wise, that very few teams are going to call fewer rushing plays than Georgia's calling right now, and they're sort of okay with that because of the fact that they don't believe that's a successful part of their arsenal at the moment. That is very telling, John.
And it's a departure of who Georgia has been. Not just old days. We're not talking about, the 90s and early 2000s. We're talking about under the Coach Smart era. It was, we are going to punch you in the mouth offensively with the run game, which opens up the passing opportunities. And I think that would be Carson's one of his biggest benefits, that he would benefit from the fact that we can run the ball. The fact that defenses can dictate right now, at least this season up to this point, they can dictate the fact that Georgia is looking at these fronts and going, you know what, running the ball is not our best option here. I think that's a problem. The fact that we can't impose our will, if you will, and say, we're going to run it whether you put 8 in the box or not. We trust our receivers, our tight ends to come in and pick up that extra player and create those holes, I think is one of the bigger challenges that Georgia faces, that we are not able to dictate what gets called. And we see that play out in the fact that we don't get to run the ball a bunch. And it's being determined by the fronts and the looks that the defenses are giving us. And we don't have the offensive firepower right now to say, I don't care what you line up in, we're still going to punch you in the mouth and it's going to be effective. I think we've seen fits and spurts, and at times, the run game gets moving. I don't think that's a Bobo thing, because you look at some of the more productive plays against Florida this past Saturday, and there was a couple end arounds back to back, and there was some creativity there. But I think you look at the overall rushing attack, and it has been underwhelming, to say the least.
All right, I don't want to be respectful of your time, but if you don't mind, I'd like to hit one more topic before we let you go here today, which is the notion that any of this discussion around Carson Beck, and listen, he's not the only subject from the game. It's just the one we're focusing on right now. I do believe it's the biggest topic around Georgia football at the moment. But any conversation around Beck has to acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is college football is way different than it was even a couple of years ago. And that when Georgia had a starting quarterback from Blackshear, Georgia, who sort of came out of nowhere, that was a figure that the average Georgia fan felt like he could relate to. And now as Beck, goes through these struggles, in a way he sort of goes through these alone, because the best that I can tell, the average fan no longer feels like he can relate to the Georgia starting quarterback. He is being, allegedly, we're led to believe, paid like he's already in the NFL, and certainly enjoying the spoils of victory before the actual victories have taken place. And I think for a lot of people, that puts a little bit of a firewall between them and one of their guys. This doesn't feel like the hometown guy anymore. The guy that is just like me, grew up down the road from me. That there is just a little bit of a difference between this quarterback and his, current struggle, and sort of typical Georgia players, when people see, Beck perhaps feeling too much pressure and perhaps, making some mistakes out there, instead of we're all coming together, we're going to figure this out together, there's this sense of looking at him and saying, well, you better figure this out because that's what you're being paid to do. That almost seems a little too harsh. But Jon, to me, as I observe, that's a little bit of the mood that's out there right now. Is that unfair in your mind?
No, and that's where we are. You got to take the good with the bad, right? And right now, the players, the athletic departments across the country are adjusting to the fact that players are going to get paid. That's the good side for them. The bad side comes with the expectations. If you're going to get paid like a professional, and they are, then the expectations are you're going to perform like a professional, and you're going to respond to adversity like a professional. So if you say, well, these are just college athletes, that's like saying a Lamborghini is just a car. And a Lamborghini is not just a car. That's not the norm, right? Flying on a private jet is not the norm. It's not the same as going on Delta or Spirit Airlines. So the perception from the outside looking in has changed. And to ignore that, I think, is grossly ignorant. And to think that the expectations wouldn't change as well is just not accurate. And so has the bar been raised? Has the perception from the outside looking in changed? Yes, it has. And Carson's not alone in that. I think, just inside Georgia's locker room, the same can be said for Malachi Starks. It is not personal. It's not like, oh, I don't like this guy, or, I'm wishing ill will, but it is the fact that, there is a perception change. There is a professionalism and an expectation that comes with that when players get paid, especially when you're talking mid-level, seven-figure, I hate to use the word salary, but the more and more, that's what it is. And part of him coming back, admittedly, was the fact that there is an NIL package that allows him to get compensated in a way that justifies, hey, I can still play college football instead of professional football. Well, you're getting paid like a professional, and that's where the expectations are, that you are going to perform at that level.
Jon, it's a fascinating topic, and obviously still plenty of chance for Georgia to be every bit the team we want it to be. Just some things to work on to see all that happen, and we'll look forward to those conversations in the near future. Big stretch of games coming up. I can't wait to talk about all of that with you. Thanks for being here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
I always enjoy it, BA, and I think the beauty is we get to discuss this spate of turnovers, this underperforming offense during a stretch where Georgia remains a top 5 team.
Absolutely.
One of the most dangerous appearing teams in the country. One of the defense has almost gone unheralded in the fact that we've been able to overcome these turnovers in a way that other teams could not do. If you look at 3-4 turnovers a game and we've won all but one of those, and we're able to come back and take the lead late in the fourth quarter in a game that honestly we had no business being in, especially going down 4 touchdowns early. I think that speaks to the resolve of this team, the ceiling of this team, and it allows us to have these conversations because the bar has been raised. And the defense has been able, aside from that first quarter against Alabama, overcome such great adversity that it's allowed us to continue to have these conversations.
I think that's exactly right, Jon. I think that's a fantastic perspective. It's great to have on the show. Always love our chats. Look forward to doing it with you again next week at the same time.
Appreciate it, BA. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.